This is a story of a girl with a dream to be the best PVMer that she can be. The combat achievements are one of old school RuneScape's biggest updates ever. 421 combat-related tasks for various bosses around the game, ranging in difficulty from easy to Grandmaster. The type of tasks vary, and out of all of them, the Grandmaster tier speed tasks for the Theater of Blood, which is arguably old school RuneScape's toughest raid, are some of the most difficult ones to achieve. The fastest time required is a neck-breaking 14:15 for a 5-man scale. Being a time that maybe only a couple thousand players have beat, 14:15 is quite the beast to conquer. But I do a lot of ToB, so it's a time that I'd already beaten over 2 years ago, before the combat achievements had even been announced as a future update. You think that's fast though? Well, the current 5-man world record is 12:15. This has set the current standard for what's considered fast at the highest level of ToB. With this in mind, I decided I wanted to go beyond the Grandmaster CA time of 14:15 to a time that less than 0.0001% of players have achieved, a time that I would need to push myself and the mechanics of ToB to their absolute limits to achieve. Sub 13. So why do so many players struggle with completing the ToB speedrunning tasks? Well, there's a few big reasons why. Number one is finding teams. Anyone who's new to ToB knows that finding a team to learn the content with can be difficult. Learning with a team of other learners can be rough because you're all inexperienced, so there's no one to help fill in the gaps in your knowledge. And players with ToB experience tend to stay away from going with learners because ToB's mechanics are extremely teamwork based. Everyone needs to work together and play well for the raid to go smoothly. Sometimes, even a single innocent mistake can kill the entire team. If everyone on the team dies, you wipe. You get kicked out of the raid, and you have to re-gear and start it all over again. No one likes wiping because not only does it waste time, it means having to pay 100k GP to get your gear back. This creates a catch-22. You can't learn how to play decently without completing raids and practicing your gameplay, but you can't practice your gameplay because you can't find a team that'll take you. It's like when you apply for jobs fresh out of university, but they all require 5 years of experience. But you can't get experience because no one's hiring people with no experience. This can make it very tough for people to get into casual ToB, let alone speedrunning. The second reason is a lack of gear. Although it is possible to use cheaper gear setups to do casual ToB and get completions, the gear needed to efficiently speedrun it is extremely expensive. It costs well over max cash to afford. But unfortunately, not everyone has this luxury, and the amount of people who do is very small. Finally, the third reason is a lack of mechanical knowledge. Speedrunning metas have evolved vastly over time since ToB was released. Even today, ToB speedrunners are still actively theory crafting ways to further and further optimize their strategies to become faster and faster at completing raids. The knowledge ceiling for ToB is extremely high, and not everyone who can do ToB knows the most up-to-date speedrunning metas to do it efficiently. Even players with max gear. This is usually either because they've never been taught better, or they just have a more relaxed approach to the game and don't really care to learn. The amount of people who know or are willing to learn how to speedrun out of the people who can do ToB is very small, and it can be difficult to find them. Any three of these things can be big obstacles for completing the ToB speedrunning tasks. Luckily, I learned ToB not too long after it was released in June 2018, so I've had over 4 years to watch guides to learn it, build up a large network of clanmates and friends to raid and improve with, and make money from all the raids I've done to afford max gear. With that in mind, I knew there weren't any obstacles in my way to achieving my goal. The next step was to find a team to help me get there. I was able to snag some of the best ToBers in the world for my runs, who all also happen to be friends of mine that I've met over my tenure as a ToB enthusiast. These incredibly talented gamers were Vacitus, Still Remains, Adore, and Desperados. All 4 of them hold the current 5 and/or 4-man ToB world records. So it's safe to say that I was in very good hands. To do ToB, each member of the team is assigned a specialized role. For efficient 5-mans, you've got 2 majors, a ranger, and 2 meleeers that must know their roles inside out. Still Remains and Vacitus were our majors, Desperados and Adore were our meleeers, and I was the ranger. Each role has specific gear setups to use and specific duties to perform in every single room. Everyone on the team has to pull their weight and contribute equally in order to beat a time like this. Half-ass shit just won't do. The key to the sub 13 is to lose minimal ticks and make minimal mistakes in your gameplay. So, to prepare for our attempts, the main thing I did was try to become as consistent as I could at avoiding mistakes, whether that was by working on my clicks and mechanical knowledge, or asking my friends to flag any mistakes they saw me making. I went into our attempts with tons of ToB KC and experience, but I knew I still had room for improvement and room to learn more of the latest metas to become faster and more proficient at the content than I'd ever been before. Finally, the day of our attempts was upon us. I streamed them live on my Twitch channel, which you should take 10 seconds to go follow right now via the link in the description below. The Theater of Blood has 5 demi-bosses, then a final boss at the very end. The order of rooms is the same every time. The basic approach to each room in efficient ToB is hammer and/or BGS spec the boss appropriately to ideally lower its defense to 0, then do as much DPS as possible, and stay alive. However, even if you do everything correctly, RNG can play a factor in how quickly you kill things, because sometimes the game just doesn't want you to hit high. I just want to preface the next part of this video by mentioning that to truly and fully explain ToB speedrunning in depth, I could spend literal hours and hours and hours going into excruciating detail about boss mechanics, weapon mechanics, individual gear setups, the use of spellbooks, etc. But in the interest of not turning the video into a wiki article, I'm going to keep my explanations of the strategies used as simple as possible and only discuss relevant boss mechanics. Now, back to our regularly scheduled program. So into the raid we went, muscles pumped and warmed up and ready to hit as high as the game would allow us to. The first boss was Maiden. Maiden targets the person standing closest to her with magic-based tornadoes. She also sometimes throws out blood pools that have a chance of turning into blood spawns, which randomly roam around the map, leaving a trail of blood behind. If you step into one of these blood trails, your HP and prayer get rapidly drained, and Maiden gets healed. At 70, 50, and 30% hit points, she spawns crabs that walk towards her and converge into a clump, and can also heal her if they get within melee distance of her. To kill Maiden as fast as possible, everyone on the team DPS'd her until she spawned her 70s, which the majors immediately froze while the meleeers and I continued DPSing the boss to try and spawn the 50s as quickly as possible right after. This was done so that the 50s could be frozen and stacked right on top of the 70s, a method known as stacking. To help speed up the time between the 70s and the 50 spawns, I sent the Xerite crossbow special attack, which has an almost guaranteed hit of 110. Then, as the 50 spawned, the meleeer sent a Din's Bulwark spec to help damage them and the previously frozen 70s. Once they were stacked, one of the majors then killed the remaining frozen stack of 70s and 50s with black Chinchompas. Finally, once the 30 spawned, the majors immediately froze them and started meleeing Maiden with the rest of the team for maximum DPS. Everyone then launched any remaining ZCB, Claw, or Halley specs that we had left for maximum DPS until Maiden was killed. This was the 30 skip. Freezes only last for 19.2 seconds, so the boss needs to be killed before then. Otherwise, the 30s would have unfrozen and healed Maiden, in which case the skip would have been failed. Stacking, skipping, using spec weapons appropriately, making sure that all the crabs are frozen, and making sure that blood pools and trails are avoided, all with minimal take loss, consistently allow Maiden to be killed in 1 minute and 18 seconds or faster, as long as your defense is lowered to 20 or below at the start of the room. So, 1 minute and 18 seconds is a strict threshold we set for our sub 13 goal. Even a 119 or 120 meant leaving the raid and starting it all over again. The next boss was Bloat. Bloat starts off by walking around the pillar in the middle of the room. While he's walking, if you aren't far enough around the pillar and happen to come within his line of sight, you'll get rapidly damaged by his range-based flies, which then go on to damage any other player within your own line of sight. Bloat then eventually stops moving and goes down. Once he's down, you don't get attacked by his flies, making this the best time to DPS him without the risk of dying. In a normal 5-man, Bloat almost always has to go down at least twice for the team to be able to do enough damage to kill him. However, it is possible to kill him in only 1 down to save a significant amount of time in the room. This is where Phoenix Necklaces come in. Phoenix Necklaces restore your hit points by 30% as soon as they drop below 20%. When a Phoenix Necklace procs, it restores your HP and it gets destroyed. So the idea is that you can use Phoenix Necklaces to do extra DPS on Bloat while he's walking, because if you keep equipping new Phoenix Necklaces, you can effectively counteract his rapid fly damage and keep your HP from hitting 0. This is P-necking. For our speedrunning attempts, the 2 meleeers and I entered the room while Bloat was walking, and stayed alive by constantly equipping new Phoenix Necklaces. On this run, I might have made a little oopsie and died to fly damage, but that didn't matter, because once Bloat went down, the Majors joined the rest of the team inside the room to continue DPSing him, and they ended up hitting high enough to finish him off before he got the chance to walk again. This is the 1 down meta, and they luckily managed to get it without me, but 1 down is a 1 down. In a typical 5-man with 3 P-neckers, there's about an 80% chance of having a successful 1 down as long as everyone stays alive. Our aim after Bloat was for the time to be at about 2 minutes or faster, which it was, so we sent the run. The next boss was the Nylocas. The Nylocas is by far the room that requires the most mechanical knowledge and experience to do efficiently. It's a wave-based boss that spawns 31 waves of different types of big and small crabs, rangers, meleeers, and mages. The waves are the same every time, and the exact same type of crabs will spawn in every run. When killed, the big crabs spawn 2 small crabs of random attack styles, and this is the only real variance in mechanics during the waves. The crabs can only be killed with their respective style. Mage crabs can only be killed with mage, and vice versa. After the waves finish, the Nylocas boss spawns. The style he attacks you with, and therefore the style that you have to attack him with and pray against, randomly changes every 6 seconds. Our general strategy to get through the waves as quickly as possible was to keep the room as clear as possible at all times. The faster the waves spawn and come into the room, the faster you can get through them and finish the room. So, memorizing the wave order for our specific roles was crucial, especially because this helped ensure that multiple people weren't attacking the same crabs when they didn't need to, and wasting precious time that they could have used to attack other crabs. The capacity of the room and how many Nylocas it can hold increases at certain waves, so it was also important to know when these cap changes occur to further prevent wave stalls, because if the room's too full, new waves can't spawn. In theory, the waves are simple to do, but like I said, it takes a large amount of experience, usually over hundreds of KC, to fully embed the wave order into your muscle memory. To speed up the time it takes to kill the Nylocas boss, we used God Books. God Books are a very important item for speedrunning ToB in larger scales, and are going to come up several more times in our run. If you preach with the God Book at the correct time during the waves, your special attack will regenerate on time for the Nylocas boss so that you can do a Crystal Halberd spec as well as a Zerite crossbow spec on him. Just like Maiden, The ZCB special attack has an almost guaranteed hit of 110 on the Nylocas boss. Without godbooking, you'd normally only be able to do either a Zerite crossbow spec or a Crystal Halberd spec, but not both. So being able to do both a ZCB spec and Halley spec absolutely melted him. Out of the different phases of the Nylocas boss, you're typically able to damage him the most during the melee and the range phases. So a big part of speedrunning the boss is also just praying to the RNG gods and hoping for as few mage phases as possible. In our run, we luckily only had 2. After completing the Nylocas, we wanted to be at a time of about 540 or less, so at a humble 541, we had the green light to keep going. The next boss was Sotetseg. Sotetseg sends out mage orbs that split into further mage and range orbs, which go on to hit 2 other players. He can also melee you if you're standing within melee distance. At 66.6 and 33.3% hit points, Sotetseg phases and chooses one person to send to the Shadow Realm. Here, the chosen player is able to see a maze that leads them back to Sotetseg. The rest of the team needs to follow the same path, and can only see it when the player in the Shadow Realm clicks tiles on the path. Sotetseg also has very high defense, sitting at 200, which is the second highest out of all of the demi-bosses, and it regenerates at the start of every phase. In our run, one of the most important things that had to be done was landing 2 Dragon Warhammer specs on every phase, to make sure that Sotetseg's defense was as low as possible. Although lowering defense is important for every demi-boss, it's especially important for Sotetseg because his defense is so high. 2 successful hammers lower his defense from 200 to 100, which is the maximum it can be lowered to. The chance of hitting hammers is almost completely down to RNG, so the meleeers brought full Inquisitor sets with them. Full Inquisitor gives a high crush bonus, and therefore increases your chances of hitting Dragon Warhammer specs. To reduce the amount of time spent on the mazes, the person who was chosen for the Shadow Realm called out the side that the maze started on as quickly as possible. The rest of the team was therefore almost immediately able to run to that side to start running the maze with almost no ticks lost. A quicker method of doing the maze does exist, but that's for when you start approaching world record territory. For a humble sub 13, the method we used was good enough. To be on pace for the sub 13, we aimed to be at about 7 minutes and 25 seconds or faster after Sotetseg. So after completing it in a speedy 1 minute and 43 seconds, that's exactly what we were at. Finally, we reached Xarpus, the 5th and final demi-boss. He has the highest defense out of all of the demi-bosses, sitting at a whopping 250. He has 3 phases. The first phase is the recovery phase. Xarpus spawns exhumes in succession that need to be stood on top of, otherwise they rapidly heal him. The second phase is the poison phase. Xarpus continuously launches poison splats at players one by one. These splats land wherever the player is standing when Xarpus turns to look at them, and stay on the ground for the rest of the fight. Once his hit points drop below about 28%, we reach the third and final phase, the counter phase. Xarpus screeches, then starts staring at one quadrant of the room at a time. If you happen to attack him when he's looking at you, you'll get hit with a massive amount of damage. To speedrun Xarpus, our first order of business was to have the team equally spread around the room for his first phase. This was to make sure that we were all stepping on the exhumes as quickly as we could to prevent them from healing him. Then, at the start of the second phase, just like Sotetseg, we had the absolutely crucial task of lowering his defense as much as possible. To bring him to 0 defense, at least 3 hammers and 86 in Bando's Godsword damage needed to be hit. Thankfully, we hit even higher than that. After that, we meleeed Xarpus in a way that we were able to time his poison splats to land on the tiles behind us without losing any ticks. This is called 5-ticking. 5-ticking is the most efficient way of DPSing Xarpus on the second phase. It also allowed us to keep the tiles needed to melee him clear of poison. For Xarpus' third phase, all we had to do was keep scything him and make sure to avoid his stare. We also brought back a familiar meta that we first visited at Nylo, the God Book. Everyone on the team with a ZCB had preached on the same tick before the room started. This allowed our specs to regenerate just in time to be able to launch ZCB specs during the third phase, which significantly boosted our damage and sped up the fight. Xarpus was completed in 2 minutes and 10 seconds, putting us at a total time of 9 minutes and 35 seconds. Onwards we went to our 6th and final obstacle, Verzik Vitur. To secure the sub-13, we were gonna need to kill her in 3 minutes and 24 seconds or faster. It was looking a little tight, but definitely still doable. Boasting extremely punishing mechanics in each one of her 3 phases, Verzik was going to be our biggest challenge in the entire raid. It was going to require exceptionally intricate teamwork and clean gameplay to get the time we needed. In Phase 1, players take turns attacking Verzik with Dawnbringer's special attack, which is the only weapon in the game that can significantly damage her. If you don't use the pillars to hide behind when she launches her attack, you risk taking anywhere between 0 to 68 mage damage, even with Protect from Magic on. In Phase 2, Verzik flies into the middle of the room. Here, she continuously attacks everyone with ranged projectiles that need to be avoided. She summons multiple Nylocas that can explode and deal up to 63 damage if you don't run away far enough. If you attack her on the wrong tick and are within melee distance of her, there's a chance she'll stun, then body slam you away, which can severely damage you as a result. Once she's below 35% hit points, she pauses her attacks, becomes invulnerable, and summons healer Nylocas that need to be damaged as much as possible. This is because she gets healed with any remaining hit points the healers have left after she unpauses and is about to become invulnerable again. This cycle continues until she's killed and enters her 3rd phase. In her 3rd and final phase, she chooses one player to be the tank. The tank has to time themselves to step underneath her at the correct time or risk damaging the entire team with her extremely powerful melee attack that can hit up to 63 and cannot be prayed against. She also sends out range and mage-based auto attacks, which can be prayed against. After every 4 auto attacks, she does 1 out of 4 special attacks that happen in the same order every time. In successful 5-mans, Verzik is usually killed so quickly that it's extremely unlikely that we'll see more than the first 2 specials. In her first special, she summons a number of the exploding Nylocas from Phase 2. For her second special, she becomes invulnerable, walks to the center of the room, and throws out webs that will trap and severely damage you if you become stuck in them. Trying to avoid punishing mechanics and adhering to metas is a given. The tough part is missing as few ticks as possible during the process. The importance of this cannot be stressed enough at Verzik and speedrunning in general, because doing so gives you the best possible chance of getting fast times, so the pressure was high. In the 2 4-hour sessions that we'd done together as a team, this was only our 2nd time making it to Verzik. Before this run, we'd resetted dozens and dozens of times. Basically any time that our pace for sub-13 had been ruined when a room was completed too slowly. This could have been at Maiden or even Xarpus. With high hopes and brave faces, we began our attempt. For Phase 1, we used a combination of the spec transfer spell and our god books to regenerate extra Dawnbringer specs to speed up the phase by 10 to 15 seconds faster than a normal run. However, this method also required all of us to stay at Verzik, not hide behind pillars, and risk taking multiple hits of up to 68 magic damage. We also had to be absolutely tick perfect. The only way to stay alive and not lose ticks was to keep chugging brews and hope that she didn't annihilate us with high hits. Thankfully, we all survived and completed the phase perfectly. On to Phase 2. The most difficult thing we faced was avoiding her exploding crabs, but again, with minimal tick loss. We started strong and dodged the crabs fairly cleanly. There's a method of avoiding the crabs consistently without losing ticks by moving between a sequence of tiles. But, rife with nervousness, I messed it up and unfortunately took a bounce. Unfazed by my hapless mistake, I quickly got back on my feet and into the P2 Verzik rhythm. It wasn't over. not too long after, we spawned the red crabs. In both normal and speedrun 5-mans, Verzik usually has to go through at least 2 invulnerability phases for the team to do enough damage to kill her. In our run, we hit so high that we were only 2.6% off from killing her in only 1 down. A very uncommon but timelessly satisfying occurrence in the world of ToB speedrunning. Ultimately though, a 2 down was still good enough. Into the 3rd phase we went, clock relentlessly ticking. We had 1 minute to go. Again, the exploding crabs were going to be our biggest hurdle. Up to 5 can spawn, 1 for each player. And just like in P2, there's a sequence of tiles you can run to avoid them tick perfectly. Luckily, we only got 2 crabs, and we managed to avoid them without anyone losing ticks. This allowed us to keep up maximum DPS and absolutely shred through her. Then, we got to this moment, right before we started our webs.
This is looking good.
On 3, we got it.
The exhilarating realization set in that we'd done enough damage at this point to almost definitely lock in the sub 13. We had it, but by how much?
I'm gonna speculate.
That's it.
Oh, we still got it, we still got it, we still got it.
Okay, guys, we just did it! We did it!
Yes.
We did it! Let's go!
Let's
go! Sub 13! Let's go!
Wait.
3 seconds. We beat the sub 13 by 3 seconds. We did it. The grind was literally finally over. This time was nothing for the rest of my team and was light years away from their personal bests, but for a humble little noob like myself, it was satisfactory. It definitely wasn't my best performance, and I'd made a number of mostly small mistakes throughout the raid, the biggest being bloat death, but ultimately, it was good enough. But is good enough really good enough? Is this the end or the beginning? Do we leave it at this? Or go for a sub 1250 next? Sub 1240? Sub 1230? Beyond that? The new prayers coming out in summer are going to change everything. They're going to break the ceiling for a lot of speedrunning content, including ToB. They're going to make future PBs more easily obtainable, but we'll have to see how we feel when we get there. For now though, my 5-man goal is complete, and there's other content I want to shift my focus to in my endless quest to go beyond Grandmastery. I'll see you next time.